ಎಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ನೆಚ್ಚಿನ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Good morning to all my dear students. Welcome back to the second session of Introduction to Water Resource Engineering of course Water Resource Engineering. Myself, Dr. H. Chandrasekhar, working as selection grade lecturer in Department of Civil Engineering, presenting this session 2. Let us have a recap of session 1. In session 1, first we discussed on the introduction to water resource development and introduction to water resource engineering, why water resource engineering is important, and what are the objectives of water resource development. And also we have discussed on the world water resources and water resources of India, water resource of Karnataka. Let us have some recap of our session 1. Some of the objectives of water resource development which we studied in our previous session, in session 1. Some of the important objectives of water resource development are irrigation, hydroelectric power generation, flood control, domestic and industrial water supply, navigation, recreational use of water, fish and wildlife, drainage control, watershed management, sediment control, salinity control, pollution abatement, insect control, and artificial precipitation. All are these objectives of water resource development. This we have discussed in our previous class. And also we have discussed on the world water resources. What is the amount of water which is present in the world and how much quantity of water is available in India. And also we have discussed on amount of utilizable water resources per capita, for per person how much quantity of water is available, also we have discussed in our previous session. And also we have discussed on the water resource development of Karnataka and major water resources of India and Karnataka we have discussed in our previous session. Let us come back to this second session of water resource engineering on Unit 1. Here in this Unit 1 second session, we are going to cover some of the major topics like introduction to irrigation. What is irrigation? What is the necessity of irrigation? Why irrigation is necessary? What are the advantages of irrigation and what are the disadvantages of irrigation? This we are going to discuss in today's session. Now coming to introduction to irrigation. ವ್ಯವಸಾಯ ಅಂದ್ರೇನು ಇದನ್ನು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ದ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಫಿಷಿಯಲ್ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಆಫ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಟು ದ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ ಫಾರ್ ದ ಗ್ರೋತ್ ಆಫ್ ಅಗ್ರಿಕಲ್ಚರಲ್ ಕ್ರಾಪ್ಸ್ ಈಸ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ಇರಿಗೇಷನ್. ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಆರ್ಟಿಫಿಷಿಯಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನೀರನ್ನ ಈ ಸಾಯಿಲ್ಗೆ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ದ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಆರ್ಟಿಫಿಷಿಯಲ್ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಆಫ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಟು ಸಾಯಿಲ್ for the growth of agricultural crops. Artificially we are applying water to the soil, not naturally. Now we are not depending on natural rainfall. We are storing the water, excess water during floods. Excess water we are going to impound it, and this impounded water is being applied to the soil whenever the plants require. Right? This is termed as irrigation. Okay. So once again, I'll brief you what is irrigation is. It is the process of artificial application of water to the soil for the growth of agricultural plants or agricultural crops is termed as irrigation. These are the methods by which the irrigation has been practiced. So we need to have the canals for supplying the water to the irrigation field, and farmer you can see the plowing in a paddy field. This is the micro irrigation which has been adopted. This is one of the method of irrigation where the water is flooded in between the two bunds. These are the two bunds where in between the two bunds the water is being made to flow. Now coming to the necessity of irrigation. Why irrigation is necessary? What is the necessity? Why we have to go for irrigation? Some of the important necessity of irrigation, let us discuss now. First is adequate quantity of water is required throughout the crop period at the root zone of plant for their growth. What is the meaning of this? Say, root zone of plants. At the root zone of plants, we need to have adequate quantity of water. And this adequate quantity of water is required throughout the crop period. Right? So, this is first necessity of irrigation. Adequate quantity of water is required throughout the crop period at the root zone of plant. Second necessity is the rainfall is not adequate to fulfill the water requirements. What is the meaning of this? Whatever the rainfall we receive, right? The rainfall which we are going to receive is not adequate to fulfill the water requirements. That means some plants require more quantity of water. Whatever the rainfall which we have we cannot use this rainfall because it is not adequate. In some places we get plenty of rainfall and in some places we get scanty rainfall, very less rainfall. So wherever the place where we get less rainfall, there we can't grow the plants like paddy, sugarcane, etc. And vegetables, and also we can't grow these crops throughout the year because rainfall is not available throughout the year. We won't get rainfall throughout the year. So rainfall is not adequate to fulfill the water requirements. And the intensity of rainfall is particularly uncertain. We can't predict the rainfall nowadays. We can't predict same quantity of rainfall every year. And the intensity of rainfall is not same throughout the entire country, entire region. It varies from place to place. In some place where the rainfall is less, there also we need to grow crops to meet the food requirement of our country. To have self-sufficiency in food production, we need to irrigate more and more area. More area has to be brought under irrigation. If you want to bring more area under irrigation, the rainfall, since the rainfall is not adequate, since the rainfall is not distributed throughout the entire area, we require to go for irrigation. Hence, irrigation becomes very, very necessary to fulfill the water requirements of crops. Right? So, we have to go for this irrigation. Irrigation becomes a very, very necessity for our country. Not only for our country, the entire world. Irrigation is very, very important to have the self-sufficiency of food production. Do you know that population is growing? Every year by year the population is growing. To meet the food requirements for the growing population, irrigation is very, very important. Now, what are the factors which govern the necessity of irrigation? Just we have studied the necessity of irrigation. Now let us discuss what are the factors which governs the necessity of irrigation. So first we have discussed insufficient rainfall. When the seasonal rainfall is not evenly distributed during the crop period, the irrigation is extremely necessary. So rainfall is whatever the rainfall which we are having in our country now, it is not sufficient to meet the food requirements, food production requirements of the present population. The first reason is the rainfall is insufficient is the first factor which governs the necessity of irrigation. Now coming to the second factor, uneven distribution of rainfall. Already I have mentioned you. So rainfall is not distributed evenly. We are not getting rainfall, same type of rainfall, entire country. Say in coastal regions, you find plenty of rainfall. If you take the average uh, rainfall of our Karnataka coastal region, it is about 2000 odd mm. Whereas if you come to the Kolar district or Bangalore rural area and Chitradurga, especially Chitradurga region, here the rainfall is very scanty rainfall we are getting. The rainfall may be around 700 mm, or this is per year. Annual rainfall if you take is 700 mm, 600 mm, like this. So the rainfall is not evenly distributed, hence the irrigation becomes a very prime necessary for our country. Next is improvement of perennial crops. What are these perennial crops? Perennial crops are those crops which can be grown throughout the year. Okay, and these perennial crops require more quantity of water. Throughout the year they can be cultivated. We won't get rainfall throughout the year, right? These perennial crops, since they grow throughout the year, the water requirement is more, and the cotton is a commercial crop. It improves the financial capacity of farmers, right? Economy of farmers will be improved if they grow this type of commercial crops. If they want to grow commercial crops, if they want to grow the crops throughout the year, if they want to grow the crops, right, they require water throughout the year. If they require water throughout the year, we have to store the excess water during the rainy season, and this water which is stored in dams, that can be used for irrigation. Say irrigation is very important here also. Next, development of agricultural area. In area where the water is scanty, where water availability is very less, irrigation is required for development of agriculture. Right? Agriculture area can be increased by adopting irrigation practices. So these are the necessity of irrigation. So what are the necessity of irrigation? One is improvement of perennial crops, development of agricultural area, insufficient rainfall, uneven distribution of rainfall. These are the factors which govern the necessity of irrigation. Now, students, let us discuss on advantages of irrigation. What are the advantages of irrigation? First advantage is irrigation helps in increasing food production of our country with improving crop yield. If we best practices of irrigation, if we adopt, we can increase the crop yield also. So that can be improved by adopting this irrigation. So irrigation helps in increasing food production. It is going to improve our food production and also improves crop yield if we practices good method of irrigation, like machineries. If we use modern agricultural implements, right? So we can improve the yield as well as the food production in irrigation. Irrigation also helps in attaining self-sufficiency in food production and food security. This is very important. Food security is very important for our country. We should be self-sufficient. We should not depend on other country for food. So whatever the population which we have in our country, for our present population, we should have a self-sufficient. We should achieve self-sufficiency in food production. So we should not go and beg other countries for food grains, right? So if you adopt a good practices of irrigation, we can grow more and more crops, more and more food can be stored, or say the food grains can be stored also for our 3 years, 4 years period, like that, right? So always a country should be self-sufficient in food. It is a pride of our country. So to have a pride, so irrigation is going to help us in attaining self-sufficiency in food production and also food security. Food security is also a very prime important. So next is, we can get away from famine by improving food production through proper irrigation facilities. We can prevent famine, right? By adopting. So every year, as in our previous class we have observed, water availability per capita per person is reducing year by year. So in a span of 25 years, our per capita availability of water has reduced 50%. So water availability is reducing. Once water availability is reducing, another way, our food production has to be improved. We have to water availability is reducing and food production we have to improve. So we are getting less and less quantity of water every year, and per capita food production we have to improve. So how can we achieve this? This can be achieved by modern irrigation facilities, by adopting modern irrigation techniques like micro irrigation, where water conservation will be a prime important. So we can, by adopting this type of the modern method of irrigation, we can control this famine, right? Next, irrigation helps to improve cash crops. As I told you, cash crops, the crops which is going to improve the economy of farmers, right? So to improve the economy of farmers, we need to grow cash crops. Some of the cash crops are say the cotton. Some of the examples I am giving: cotton, sunflower. So palm oil, all of you know this oil, palm oil trees. This is the palm oil tree. So by doing this, by adopting this type of irrigation, we can improve the cash crops, production of cash crops. So the economy of farmer will also be improved. This is another advantage of irrigation. Irrigation helps to improve cash crops. And irrigation eliminates mixed cropping, and single superior crop can be grown to achieve maximum benefits. So we can grow a single superior crop can be grown to achieve maximum benefits. So another advantage is irrigation helps farmer to grow 2 or more crops in a year in the same land. In the same land, we can grow 2 or more crops in a year. Throughout the year, we can grow crops by adopting this irrigation practices. So by adopting this irrigation, the economy of farmers also will improve. The food production also will be improved. Irrigation helps to our revenue returns, which help in all-round development of country. So average monthly income of rural households, if you take from cultivation, so all sources, agricultural households, the monthly income is 8,931, and non-agricultural households 7,269, and all households this is 8,059 rupees, right? See, so the economy we can improve. What a present economy which you have, this is the economical status. This economical status, average monthly income of our rural households can be improved if we adopt irrigation. Another advantage is we can also go for the generation of hydroelectric power. Say the dam which you are going to construct to store the surplus quantity of water, this water can be utilized for generation of hydroelectric power. Both purpose it serves. Irrigation also can be served, and also hydroelectric power generation also we can achieve. And irrigation canals can be used and developed for navigation purpose. So whatever the canals which you are going to construct to distribute the water to the irrigation fields, the same canal can be used and developed for navigation purpose, to move from one place to another place, to move even the goods from one place to another place. And reservoirs which are constructed can also be utilized for development of fishery projects. Whatever the dams we are going to construct, tanks we are going to construct, in these dams and in these irrigation tanks we can develop the fishery projects. And trees are generally grown on the banks of the canals, and this improves the timber wealth of the country and also helps in reducing soil erosion. See, this is the canal bank. On the bank of canal like this, the trees can be cultivated. And gardens and parks may be developed near canal banks and reservoirs. This is one such view of our famous KRS dam. On the banks of the KRS dam, we have very famous Brindavan gardens. Like this, gardens and parks may be developed near canal banks and reservoirs. We have one more type of garden in Almaty Reservoir, near Almaty Reservoir. And irrigation helps in supplying water to towns for domestic and industrial use. Whatever water we store in the reservoir, this water which is stored in the reservoir can also be used for supplying water to towns for domestic and industrial use. And embankments of irrigation canals and inspection roads. See, on the embankments of the irrigation canals, on both embankments of irrigation canals, one of the embankment can be used for roads. It helps as a good way of communication. This is one canal bank. On the canal bank, the road has been constructed for movement of men and vehicles. These are the advantages of irrigation. Now I will summarize once again the advantages of irrigation. So what are the advantages? Let us summarize. Irrigation helps in increasing the food production, helps in self-sufficiency in food production and food security. By improving food production, it prevents famine. Irrigation helps to improve cash crops so that economy of farmer can be improved. Single crop can be grown to achieve maximum benefits. Irrigation helps farmers to grow 2 or more crops in a year in the same land. Hence, they can earn more money with improving their living standards. Irrigation helps to improve our revenue returns. Major irrigation projects can be designed for generation of hydroelectric power. Irrigation canals can be used and developed for navigation purpose. Reservoirs constructed can be utilized for development of fishery projects. Timbers are grown on the banks of the canals, which increase timber wealth of the country. Gardens and parks may be developed near canal banks and reservoirs. Irrigation helps in supplying water to towns for domestic and industrial use. And embankment of irrigation canals and inspection roads provide good way for communication. These are the advantages of irrigation. Now coming to disadvantages of irrigation. There are few disadvantages also, right? But disadvantages are very less compared to advantages. But we should know what are these disadvantages also. The first disadvantage is the rise of water table. See, whenever we start doing the cultivation or irrigation, so there is a chances of excess seepage of water from canal beds. Say when canals are not lined, unlined canals, right? In the case of unlined canals, there is a chances of water seepage will be there. Because of water seepage, the water table in the surrounding area will increase. There will be rise of water table in the surrounding area, that is on the banks of on either sides of the canal beds. There will be the seepage of water, and this seepage of water increases the groundwater table. And this increased groundwater table, see, the water is required for irrigation, but the same water, if it is excess, It also spoils the plants. It is dangerous to the plants. Hence, the water table saturate root zone of plant. This water table saturates the root zone of plant and reduces the crop yield. Crop yield will be reduced. So it has to be controlled. The water table has to be controlled properly. So the rise of water table, sometimes it is not beneficial also. Not only all area, only along the canal beds. So the lining of canal is important. There is some remedy for this, right? So lining of canal has to be practiced. That we will discuss in another chapter called canal lining. In detail we will discuss there. Next is formation of marshy land. Excess seepage of irrigation water may leads to marshy land. There is remedy for this also. Drainage. Drainage facilities has to be adopted, right? We are going to provide porous drain pipes below, and we are going to accumulate all the water from this soil through these porous drain pipes and will be discharged. So formation of marshy land. Because of the seepage of water into the land, there will be marshy area will be there. This marshy area acts as a colonies for mosquitoes breeding, which is responsible for many diseases like malaria, dengue, chikungunya, etc. So this is another disadvantage of irrigation. Whatever these disadvantages are there, we are going to learn them, but we are going to rectify it. Right? The water resource development, water resource engineering is going to teach us how to rectify these disadvantages. Even dampness in weather also will be caused. Whenever we go near the irrigated area, there will be some cold climate will be there because of the evaporation of water. So transpiration of water from the leaves. Because of the transpiration of water from the leaves, so the moisture content in the surrounding agricultural area will be high. And this dampness will lead to cold, cough and other diseases. Another important thing is loss of valuable land. So valuable land may be submerged due to construction of reservoir canals and other hydraulic structures. So whenever you construct a dam to store water, so large area will be submerged. We have to rehabilitate the people. Sometimes we have to rehabilitate the entire town. One such example is Bagalkote, right? So it was submerged. The old Bagalkote was submerged in Krishna Reservoir. That is a catchment. That is a water spread area of Krishna Reservoir. The Bagalkote was submerged. A new Bagalkote town has been constructed. It was developed. Next is groundwater pollution. So the groundwater pollution is due to the seepage of fertilizers and pesticides during the irrigation will leads to groundwater pollution. So we have to control this. So excessive use of fertilizers is not feasible. Even for pesticides also. So excessive use of seepage and pesticides we have to avoid. So this seepage of fertilizers and pesticides, okay, during irrigation will leads to groundwater pollution. Thank you for